Does second-hand religion mean a second-hand experience of God? Is not trying to experience the reality of first-hand religion in the presence of the indwelling spirit and through the mind mirror of another's religious philosophy like trying to experience the warmth of the caress of a human hand while wearing a glove? Human language is like wearing a glove while caressing someone you love. Conversely, human language is also like trying to feel the caress of someone who loves you, while the one giving the caress is wearing a glove. In other words, language is vital for communicating how we think and feel, while functioning as a veritable imprisonment of the mind to a material world of shadows. We find within language a more or less straight path into a vast and dense jungle. There, in the vast density of human language, it is easy to hide in the mental caves built by and full of the fossilized bones of our ancestors. This is the place where we feel the safest from the approach of strangers with strange ideas. Why would you ever dare to go up the unknown path where few dare to travel, and should they return are full of strange and unexplainable experiences? What you just know in your boxed-in tiny world full of someone else's ready-made explanations can't possibly be true, can they? From within this density of language, the majority only dare to emerge when they see the approach of familiars who share the same beliefs which the priests in authority of one higher order or another continually beat out as ancient rhythms of dead and fossilized philosophies the individual readily recognizes and resonates with about God, life, science, and religion, shared by and continually reinforced by fellow believers. These high priests of science, philosophy, religion, politics, banks, multinational corporations, and media create human shadows on the inner cave walls of the mind about the reality of the spiritual universe, superimposed upon the material one. The majority hear as though constantly hypnotized by the sounds of the drums of authority and control, which the high priests of the unquestionable orders of absolute power continually exercise over the material minds and lives of all too willing and unquestioning adherents. Another metaphor is the individual who goes out into the desert, where he or she proceeds to lie down in a dry riverbed, flailing the arms in the manner of a swimmer, as though there is still a current of water running through it. Such a person would be considered unsound of mind, wouldn't he or she? In the same vein of thought, no one in his or her right mind would put the mouth over the end of the tailpipe of a car and inhale carbon monoxide fumes. Such a one would be thought to be suicidal. And yet this is exactly what human beings do every time they inhale from the end of a cigarette, silently acknowledging from time to time they need to quit and never making a decision to act upon. Can you separate out your own authentic philosophy of your living experiences of the lessons of life from that which you have been told to believe is the truth? You were born an original, don't die a copy. I've known so many individuals, including some readers of the Urantia Book, who might greatly benefit by taking that statement into a place within their hearts and minds wherein there is no ego inflation to mar an otherwise utterly true sincerity. From decades of observation, I see too many who transit from Urantia a clone of a clone of a clone, manifesting a copy and paste mentality, but little or no original expression of their own. Apparently too fearful to reveal their own thoughts, opinions, and beliefs, or allow others to have their own thoughts, opinions, and beliefs, except to vehemently defend the constructs they intellectually hide behind and which someone else created for them. The Allegory of the Cave, taken from faculty.washington.edu. Plato realizes that the general run of humankind can think and speak, etc., without, so far as they acknowledge, any awareness of his realm of forms. The Allegory of the Cave is supposed to explain this. In the allegory, Plato likens people untutored in the theory of forms to prisoners chained in a cave, unable to turn their heads. All they can see is the wall of the cave. Behind them burns a fire. Between the fire and the prisoners there is a parapet, along which puppeteers can walk. The puppeteers who are behind the prisoners hold up puppets that cast shadows on the wall of the cave. The prisoners are unable to see these puppets, the real objects that pass behind them. What the prisoners see and hear are shadows and echoes cast by objects that they do not see. Such prisoners would mistake appearance for reality. They would think the things they see on the wall, the shadows, were real. They would know nothing of the real causes of the shadows. So when the prisoners talk, what are they talking about? If an object, a book, let us say, is carried past behind them, it casts a shadow on the wall, and a prisoner says, "I see a book," what is he talking about? He thinks he is talking about a book, but he is really talking about a shadow. But he uses the word book. What does that refer to? And if they could talk to one another, don't you think they'd suppose that the names they used applied to the things they see passing before them? Plato's point is that the prisoners would be mistaken, for they would be taking the terms in their language to refer to the shadows that pass before their eyes rather than, as is correct in Plato's view, to the real things that cast the shadows. If a prisoner says, "That's a book," he thinks that the word book refers to the very thing he is looking at, but he would be wrong. He's only looking at a shadow. The real referent of the word book he cannot see. To see it, he would have to turn his head around. Plato's point? The general terms of our language are not names of the physical objects that we can see. They are actually names of things that we cannot see, things that we can only grasp with the mind. When the prisoners are released, they can turn their heads and see the real objects. Then they realize their error. What can we do that is analogous to turning our heads and seeing the causes of the shadows? We can come to grasp the forms with our minds. Plato's aim in the Republic is to describe what is necessary for us to achieve this reflective understanding. But even without it, it remains true that our very ability to think and to speak depends on the forms. For the terms of the language we use get their meaning by naming the forms that the objects we perceive participate in. The prisoners may learn what a book is by their experience with shadows of books, but they would be mistaken if they thought that the word book refers to something that any of them has ever seen. Likewise, we may acquire concepts by our perceptual experience of physical objects, but we would be mistaken if we thought that the concepts that we grasp were on the same level as the things we perceive. 2 eyeballs attached to 3 pounds of flesh. Is death humankind's only release from the material world of shadows? Or can we increasingly be liberated from this material world of shadows through sincere choosing to respond to the indwelling Spirit of God, even while still in human form? It is incredibly self-inflating, self-aggrandizing, ignorantly arrogant, and affectatious to assume there is no God, while existing inside an eternal and well-nigh infinite universe as a creature of flesh and blood, whose mortal existence is over in a relative instant of time. Thus it may be seen that religious longings and spiritual urges are not of such a nature as would merely lead men to want to believe in God, but rather are they of such nature and power that men are profoundly impressed with the conviction that they ought to believe in God. The sense of evolutionary duty and the obligations consequent upon the illumination of revelation make such a profound impression upon man's moral nature that he finally reaches that position of mind and that attitude of soul where he concludes that he has no right not to believe in God. The higher and super philosophic wisdom of such enlightened and disciplined individuals ultimately instructs them that to doubt God or distrust his goodness would be to prove untrue to the realest and deepest thing within the human mind and soul, the divine adjuster. It is equally and incredibly self-inflating, self-aggrandizing, ignorantly arrogant, and affectatious to assume that you have a monopoly on truth, beauty, and goodness. Your version of the Paradise Father in personal beliefs, opinions, and experiences qualify you only to speak on the Paradise Father's behalf as the mouthpiece of God, dictating to your fellow beings the absolute truth according to you. Here is one of the subtleties of deep wisdom. One can believe in and study a book of truth, and or believe in the high priest of authority for the whole of the mortal existence, and never experience the conceptual nuggets of truth within its pages, or accomplish more than being a blind adherent to so-called science, philosophy, and religion. Why? Truth is a living experience, which may only be acquired through the lessons of life, and is more often than not only feelingly experienced in adversity. And it is only when one chooses by an act of the will, lifting the conceptual nugget of truth up and off the written page, embracing the concept and desiring to experience the truth of the moral principle without resistance, when the Spirit of God within the mind draws one toward those life circumstances wherein the lesson of life may be acquired as a moral and spiritual experiential value. Such acts of moral choosing are the woof upon which the Spirit weaves the warp of the ascending and surviving soul.